In what ways does your media product use, develop and change form and conventions of real media products? I believe I have used, developed and challenged forms and conventions of social realism, and this is to create an abstract of real-life dramas with my own interpretations and my own ideas on top of them. So when looking at similar ideas and different dramas and movies, etc. for my opening sequence, I thought that The Five Daughters, which was a drama series played on BBC One, I thought it really influenced the idea of Ipswich murders amongst my opening sequence, and that therefore after watching it wanted me to challenge the idea of having something realistic within my opening sequence and then making it my own. One way in which I used the forms and conventions of social realism was through the use of the title and of the film and its font and style. I considered having the idea of my title Promiscuous Endings at the end of my opening sequence because I thought this would add more suspense to the opening sequence, and I think it would make people think more about what it is actually about and why it's called that. I think that I've used the idea of having it at the end of the sequence to relate to that, so therefore I've used the forms and conventions within this part of the film. The opening sequence also displays the use of production cards, and this reflects different organisations and institutions, so these appear different to other titles. For this, I think I also used forms and conventions because all films will use production cards, therefore it's no different and I haven't challenged it in any way. I wanted the title and the font style to be consistent throughout my opening sequence so that it didn't look too different. I wanted to show them as simplistic as possible, and this is because I wanted to show the idea of social realism through the titles themselves. Therefore, I think on a whole, I have used forms and conventions of social realism through the use of titles, font and style. For me, it wasn't hard to pick up a suitable location for my opening sequence because I decided to use the location of Thetford, which I live in, as I think it can convey a sense of squalor and dirtiness and environment which look realistic for social realism as well. So therefore I thought this was a really good way to convey the location throughout the sequence. Realism is also influenced upon the location, and this is so that it can relate to how the character is in this sense of whereabouts and how she doesn't come from the best of backgrounds. Overall, I think I've developed the forms and conventions in this case of social realism because I've put my own stamp on ideas and tried to make them a little bit different. The costume and props I used weren't that much different, and however I did try and challenge the forms and conventions of social realism in this part, and this is because I wanted the character's emotions and her personality to be shown through her costume choice. So therefore her outfit wasn't glamorous and it wasn't anything special, it was just something very ordinary and something a little bit revealing on one hand. I think it abides by the conventions of social realism as the costumes were thought of as a way of expressing the storyline as well. It shows how our clothes can be one of the main influences on people's appearances. When we challenge the forms and conventions of real media products in this part. Camera work and editing. Well, this is for my opening sequence, consists of a lot of point of view shots, shot reverse shots and also close-ups. When it came to the editing part, I also believed that I would include a voiceover because I thought this would be a great way to tell the story. I also used a lot of transition and also the blur effects, which were very different. And this for the social realism idea within the sequence, I thought gave a accurate representation of the character's lifestyle. So overall, I think this part also developed forms and conventions of social realism because I was using someone else's idea. But the storyline and how the opening suggests it, well, I think that one of the main suggested it within my opening sequence was the Enigma codes shown. And these raised the questions of why is she in this state? And I think this is shown through the music, the footage and the voiceover all together. The footage suggests she is lonely, and this therefore adheres to the storyline because she is on her own and the footage just tracks her movements. So this can not always be expected from social realism, but therefore this was my own ideas and I wanted it to seem like it as well. For this part, I also thought that this bit really challenged the conventions of social realism. The first shot of my character was for an extreme close-up, and this was used to show the character and showing a really dramatic effect as soon as she was introduced. So therefore I developed the forms and conventions of a different genre to fit my own. And last but not least, special effects which I used within my opening sequence was in fact the blur, which I think was the most important. And this gave an accurate approach to how my character's life was in her eyes, which she saw to be very dull, and I think this on a whole challenges the forms and conventions of social realism. And some people may think it's more compatible with another genre, like horror for example, but I really thought it conveyed social realism because it made her seem like it was her reality and she needed to escape from it, but she didn't know how. On the whole, I think these were the main ways that my media product used and challenged developed and challenged the conventions of social realism.